All right, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of SuperFreq. I am your host, Talia, and I have made my way back from a very interesting sojourn of memory recall. And for those of you who have been following along, then you know I just finished a very profound, let's say, reorganization and assignment to the Basilica in Vatican City in Rome. And I am still recalibrating from all of that. As information comes in, I will share some of it on a podcast. For those of you in the Field Hub and the Pattern Lab, you guys will get a deeper dive into the mechanics. And for those who have questions in upcoming sessions, I'm happy to answer those for you as well. So I am currently back in California, in Los Angeles, particularly for the first time in close to 6 years. And the state and condition of this city is really difficult to witness. It is a state of such deep disempowerment, and just the separation and the brokenness of the zombie apocalypse that I have been walking and interacting with the last 3 days. Astonishing. Really, like how did we get here, right? This is the questions I'm asking. Like, I talk about all this stuff all the time. You guys know this. It's one thing to see stuff and talk about it and have the embodied understanding of it, but it's a whole other to have to experience the literal feedback loop of that awareness, like literally feeling like I am dropped into this world, absolutely not of it, almost invisible, but seeing everything. Like I feel like I've just been projected into this grid line to gather information, and then I'll be sent somewhere else in a way, which I never thought I would be doing any of this when I first started all of this work. Kind of actually like laughed at the idea that, you can just walk around a place and the field changes. But it is absolutely, after 20 years of studying all of this, exactly how it happens. So I'm going to get into this in layers. And this is coming off of a Substack essay, which thank you all very much for the feedback on that, of the quiet cost of obedience. And this is moving into a 3-part series of engineered reality. But in today's podcast, I'm going to talk about the mechanics of how consciousness and the grid line that you're in reflects the consciousness that is running and available within that grid line. It creates very succinct feedback loops, and you are going to see the polarity of it. So when I'm walking around Venice Beach, seeing the state of humanity in this deep state of polarization, their separation from themselves, I'm not disgusted. I'm not feeling all the way unsafe, even though I've been clocked by some zombied, drugged out, homeless, walking very, very early in the morning because, of course, I have this massive jet lag. But I feel fine because I know how energetically to protect myself and stuff. But even still, you never know because it's very unpredictable when people are that disembodied. But I'm very, quite sad by the state of how broken people are and how disassociated they are and how it is absolutely a zombie apocalypse and how orchestrated that has been to move into bicosis, like I talked about in my last episode, which is like a complete and total bifurcation of mind and body to the point where it's creating its own version of psychosis. So when I walk around and see people this disenfranchised from the God within them, mechanically how that happens is they literally cannot sense, feel, or have access to a different way of being. So that pattern will get recursed so deeply that it starts to operate inside of a concentric circle feedback loop. So if you can imagine those really horrifying rides at Disneyland where it's like teacups and you're in a teacup that's in a saucer and there's like 3 to 4 of those teacups on saucers violently rotating themselves in one direction while simultaneously the entire ride that those saucers are on are violently oscillating the other direction. So it's creating this deliberate attempt to, under the guise of it being a really good time, disorient your temporal anchoring. And it's not a surprise that is inside of the Alice in Wonderland part of these parks, which is very metaphorically based on time and time references and losing time, where Allison goes down to the rabbit hole. She's chasing a rabbit that's always late, and then she subsequently wakes up from the dream and goes back into reality. So it's very much based on a lot of mathematics and time references. And then so you have this ride that is moving you completely deliberately out of that, which is kind of how I see these people as I walk through and down this very long boardwalk, which I haven't been on again in so long. So very interesting. There is a violent, some of it is very, very slow oscillation. The other one is extremely high vibrating oscillations in a concentric circle, and it's like glitching. And it kind of is like a flashing light going on and off, and they just cannot stop this violent individual like feedback loop that they're in. So there's a very succinct, as I was just walking this morning, there's a way that this presents itself mechanically, how this happens. And I wrote down some of it so I could be able to not collapse into, let's say, the empathy part of what I've been experiencing with people, because it's very sad to see animals, couples, the state of the animals that are with homeless people, the amount of disassociation that's there, and the state of humanity in general at this point in this particular grid line, even after I've been in all these other places all over the world the last 6 months. So I'm going to just deliver it to you as it came to me, and we'll go from there and then see how we feel. How did we get here will be answered at some point, because essentially this is all happening in succession. We got here because of recursive patterning. We got here because we are conditioned to hate change. We got here because I'll say people don't hate change, nervous systems do. And there has been an intentional veiling of access to self. There has been a deliberate attempt to disenfranchise the nuclear family, to separate us from the God within us. And now we are a collective cohort that is more medicated and in debt and separate from each other and polarized from each other now more than ever across the globe. And the good news about all of that is the unveiling is here. We are actively inside of it, and there will continue to be, planted stories, planted events to further perpetuate outrage. And I go into that at length in, again, this engineered reality series coming up on Substack. So please follow along over there and let's get into it. So essentially the question that I asked, even though I kind of already knew the answer like intuitively, but I don't know if I've actually talked about it in this way, but how does the polarity of people's experience reflect the consciousness of the grid line that you're living on? That was the question. So how does the polarity of people's experience within a particular grid line reflect the collective consciousness of that grid line? And the answer that I got was, first, there's individual collective feedback loops. So in quantum psychosomatics, okay, your polarized experiences aren't just psychological or energetic. They're quantum states held in your cellular matrix that entangle with the field's collective body. So you have your individual field, and then you have the auric field of the collective that you're operating inside of. And that goes by neighborhood, by neighborhood, by neighborhood. So when you experience extreme polarity by way of like expansion, contraction, homelessness, complete, next to millionaires, when you have that level of polarity, your somatic system collapses specific quantum probabilities into biological reality. So these collapses don't happen in isolation. They happen through field intelligence. Your body's quantum state instantaneously correlates with other bodies processing similar polarities. So the feedback loop is actually quantum entanglement at the quantum psychosomatic level. Your cells know what the collective body knows because they are the collective body differentiated. So essentially, you have an individual feedback loop, and then you have an individual collective feedback loop. So this is why your environment is an environment that you co-regulate with, because grid lines are information highways. Okay, they're not metaphorical pathways. They're quantum coherence networks where field intelligence self-organizes. And as you move through memory, you're going to be guided and pinged to go to specific locations to become even more coherent versions of yourselves. Okay, you're going to move into a different type of network so your field intelligence can reorganize itself. So your body acts as both a node and an antenna. So polarized psychosomatic states create measurable quantum signatures, and each grid line has its own signature. So right now, because there's so much fascia crystalline restructuring that are propagating through our nervous systems and morphogenic fields at the moment, high polarity experiences generate stronger quantum coherence or decoherence patterns. So that is an intentional, let's say, instruction with fields. It's intentional. So I'm going to say that again. High polarity experiences generate stronger quantum coherence or decoherence patterns. When, let's say, multiple bodies in proximity hold similar psychosomatic tensions, they create standing wave patterns in the local field, what shows up as charged locations or collective resonance zones. The grid isn't carrying information, it is information achieving self-awareness through distributed embodiment. Okay. This is why certain fields and certain locations have an amplified energetic expression to them. Sedona, Mount Shasta, spiritual vortices. Yes, the land and the grid line and the consciousness of that land holds a specific resonance, but it's what is being generated inside that field in terms of intention that creates a completely different or amplified charge within that field. So people will say, oh my God, every single time I just go to this particular part of the beach, or every single time I go to, Sedona or Mount Shasta or Glastonbury, I just get all of these messages and I feel a certain way. Part of that is because of the grid line. Part of that also is because of what we're doing to influence that grid line. And part of that is our nervous system establishing meaning making and familiarity around a certain location and grid line, so we have and create an expected outcome from that particular grid line. There's information highways. The next point as to how we get here, okay, how we get so extremely polarized and how certain people just cannot see a different way out, confirms the synthetic and the organic architecture that's completely being established now, and how our nervous systems are syncing up with one or the other. But it is this polarization integration paradox. So your body exists in superposition until observation, okay, conscious awareness, collapses it into a specific psychosomatic state. So polarity isn't dysfunction. It's your quantum system maintaining multiple potential states simultaneously. This is what holding paradox is. So the person experiencing chronic pain and, let's say, spontaneous remission isn't confused. They're embodying quantum superposition until field intelligence decides which, let's say, timeline or comprehensive pattern aggregate to collapse into manifestation. So if you can hold paradox, and then through that emergent field, spontaneous remission becomes possible for you without collapsing into the patterns that created that, let's say, cancer experience for you. Like, why does your consciousness have to create homelessness or cancer or a symptom in order to remember itself? Okay. That's the question I ask a lot when I see symptoms, is what is happening at a recursive level in the consciousness that you're stationed at now with regards to how you're rendering yourself in time now that is creating this level of body pain, separation, debt, recursive patterning, feedback loop with lack. What is actually going on there? What are we not understanding? So if you can experience and embody, let's say, or hold the paradox around that superposition until the field intelligence again decides which timeline to collapse and then into manifestation / personal experience, if you can hold that, then those patterns, you move through the patterns at, let's say, a more efficient rate. So collective consciousness holds all polarities as simultaneous quantum potential. It's no different than us individually. So because we hold all of these polarities simultaneously, integration doesn't mean choosing one pole. It means expanding your somatic capacity to hold quantum superposition without premature collapse. So the collective body evolves by increasing its coherence bandwidth, its ability to maintain paradox somatically without fragmenting into discrete either-or states. So when I see this level of polarity, that's telling me that the consciousness that's surrounding it doesn't have a whole lot of coherence bandwidth. They're being very distracted by performance and goodies and an abundance of things to do and keeping you constantly in the future, away from a slower, nature-bound pace, deliberately, so you're not individually expanding more of your capacity to be able to hold more paradox and more of your own light. So that creates a reflective mirroring dynamic. And I've talked about mirror mechanics a lot. I posted and wrote about it on Substack on December 25th. Kind of an interesting stack. Go check that out. So the reflective mirroring, essentially the consciousness here and the grid line here and the people here are reflecting the consciousness it's running. So you're not receiving the field's polarities. You are the field achieving local observation. When your body experiences this level of polarity, it's because the field intelligence is using your nervous system to measure its own quantum state. So let me just say that again. The field around you is utilizing your field, okay? The intelligence that's running in your field as a way to measure itself, its own quantum state, which, again, whenever I get into the deeper layers of this work, always becomes so unbelievably simple that what you think about, you bring about. The people that you surround yourself with matter, that it's all about coherence. Coherence is the name of the game. And the more people aware individually of who can hold their own their own selves, who can have themselves and hold paradox the most, change the field that they're in. That is how we collectively evolve. So the universe knowing itself, right, through us individually, it's because the field is using your nervous system, the plasma of your bodies, to reflect what's happening back to it. Literally ontological systems, very much how large language models are working right now in reflective mirroring mechanics in order to understand itself better. So let's say more sensitive bodies act as quantum measurement devices for, let's say, the collective soma. Your migraine, your autoimmune flare, your spontaneous kundalini activation. Okay, these are not personal pathologies or achievements. They're just the collective body taking quantum measurements of itself through your psychosomatic apparatus. So you feel torn between extremes because the field is torn. And your body is sophisticated enough to register that quantum tension cellularly before it collapses into consensus reality. So the implications of all of this is, unfortunately, what unintegrated polarity looks like. And there's some questions that I think we should be asking ourselves when we're interacting in these environments. It's not enough just to ignore what's going on. It's asking a different set of questions as to where the pressure is actually coming from. So let me walk you through some questions, you guys. Let's do a field audit, okay? Because I know I just said a bunch of stuff. You're like, okay, Talia, well, that sounds really great. But just understand and take away this one idea, okay? Polarity is not a dysfunction. It's just a gradient. And gradient is required for any type of phase transition. So if you think about each continent as like one big brain, okay, one big host or storage facility, it operates like a system within a larger system. The system evolves by increasing bandwidth for paradox. That's how we evolve. And if we lose tolerance for that, we basically drop and continue to drop in resonance. So let's say a fifth dimensional consciousness that loses coherence will move and shift down to a 4.5, 4.1, 3.8, 3.5, okay, third dimension into very extreme levels of polarity, desensitized to the point where you can't even believe you're living in the world that you're living in. You actually can't believe you're seeing some of the shit around you that you're seeing. How morality has been deteriorated, how our collective prefrontal cortex has been deteriorated. We are frozen. So I'm going to give you guys a set of questions to ask yourselves. Number one, a field audit within the grid line that you're in, okay, or place that you go to. Another one to audit just in terms of the consciousness reflecting itself back to you throughout your environment, your relationships, like, do I feel good around this person? And then like a polarity diagnostic. Let's say you can ask yourself, well, I'll get to that. And then how you know you're in a pattern versus a threshold. So the first question I want you to ask in the field audit is, what changes in my nervous system when I enter this place? Do I feel more contracted, expanded, vigilant, or receptive here? Does my body move toward clarity or confusion in this environment? Or do I collapse into an old survival strategy? Is this activation clean? Like, is it alert, grounded, or is it chaotic, anxious, and narrative heavy? I left a very narrative heavy location. And I'm in a very disassociated location right now. So I find both of those very interesting because the narrative heavy location where I was before was very activating based on the level of memory I was moving through. So if you have the ability to move through, let's say, very chaotic places, but hold yourself inside of that, like many of you doing the work here, you can be in a really disenfranchised location and have it be very activating for you. But for those who are more sensitive, just ask yourself that series of questions if you're thinking about moving towards another location, okay? So your relationship audit. Around this particular person, do I become more myself or more strategic? Do I feel amplified or distorted? What part of me comes online around this person? Is it expansive? Is it performative? Or is it defensive? Is this a relationship that feels, let's say, too future-oriented or too past-oriented? Or do I have the capacity to stay very present with this person and evolve in real time? This will move you into more clarity around the relationships that are changing for all of you right now. And I know that they are. People are leaving, new people are coming in, etc. Okay, so polarity diagnostics, essentially how you know you're in a pattern versus a threshold. So, critical distinction. Does this situation I'm in feel like an old pattern resurfacing or like pressure before a new identity emerges? Is my body tired of this or sharpened by it? Most of you are likely in the former. If I removed the narrative, okay, whatever the RAS system of the brain, the reticular activating system of the brain, which is the narrative making part of our brains, if I remove the narrative, what remains? Fear, expansion, or something else? If it's fear, it's a recursive logic. So you're going to want to hold, like literally kick that logic out because that's not you. It's conditioned. And if it's expansion or something else, then you know you're at a threshold. And we can work around both of those. So don't worry there. All right, you guys. So just to give you an overarching summary here, re-listen to those questions, audit your own life. But your body is not just reacting to life. It's participating in a distributed feedback system between individual consciousness and collective patterning. The polarities you feel are not an accident. They are accommodating underlying patterns and programs, okay? Expansion, contraction, despair and hope, tension and release. They're gradients of stored potential that are organizing under pressure. The collective works the same way. And I'm going to talk a lot about patterns under pressure in the Field Hub, in the Pattern Lab, and a lot this year because it is something that when you train your brain to see, you can't unsee it. It is like very, very potent pattern recognition, human behavior identification 101 mechanics. So these are not random polarities. They're gradients stored potential organizing under pressure. When you have awareness and that meets one of our sensations, something collapses in that process into identity, biology, or action. And that collapse doesn't happen in isolation. It's not in a vacuum. I mean, quantum mechanically, you can say that it is in a void or a vacuum, but it's not an isolated event. It ripples through relational networks, your family lineages, the environment that we're in, and shared nervous systems. So real integration isn't about eliminating polarity. It's about increasing your capacity to hold complexity without fragmenting. It means you can expand your coherence bandwidth so you don't prematurely collapse into old patterns. So perhaps the real question here isn't how to fix your polarity, but what new kind of attractor state your body is stabilizing under constraint, and what possibility is waiting on the other side of that threshold. So we have all of these constraints, all these patterns under pressure. We're trying to reconcile the polarity inside of ourselves by holding more paradox. But perhaps many of you don't know what that means to hold paradox yet. And so ask yourselves that question. This is a pressure point. I'm at a threshold with opposing views. What possibility is waiting on the other side of that threshold for me? Maybe it's a feeling. Maybe it's more peace. Maybe it's a different state. Maybe it's your shoulders that drop an inch. So I'll leave you all with that question and those series of questions to ask yourself in this podcast. I look forward to seeing you guys in sessions. Just to let you know, the Pattern Lab is open for enrollment. There will be a limited group that I'm allowing in. We have, a handful of spots still open. There's been some early adopters, which I've been very quiet about launching this. So drop into the Field Hub if you really want to learn the mechanics and have, monthly drop-ins and calibrations with loads and loads of resources, including the shop now is available in there. By the time you get to the Pattern Lab, you have the entire Pattern Academy, all of the workshops, and all of the shop included in that. And it's very, very interactive. It's live interactive with me where we will workshop patterns, what's coming up for you in real time. All right, you guys, always love the questions that you ask. I'll see you in the field and in another episode in a couple weeks. Take care.